Hey everybody, Kenny here. Today I'm going to be discussing a couple of leveling methods for the dungeon crawling RPG Stranger of Sword City. This is a game that's been out for a while, but I know that a remastered version recently released for PC and multiple platforms, packaged with another dungeon crawling RPG from the developer Experience called Savior of Sapphire Wings, I believe. So I figured if anybody has been wanting to kind of power level their way through and haven't really been finding any good methods of doing it, these are some very handy options that I very much recommend. First off, we're going to go over my party loadout. As you can see, all of my characters that I'm bringing along have all leveled up to character level 30 in their base class and are currently in their second or third class, leveling for the purpose of gaining abilities that I want for specific builds that I want to do with each of these characters. I may create some videos later on specifying the builds that I'm doing here, but for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to show the method. The location that we're going to be using for this method is the Mausoleum of Flame. The Mausoleum of Flame is a later game dungeon that you'll come across as you progress through the slums, and is the more lucrative of the later game grinding spots. The first method is what I'm going to refer to as the reinforcements method. Now, the reason I call this the reinforcements method is that the means of gaining experience is based on entering a combat scenario against a group of enemies that call in reinforcements during the battle. So new units join the battle as it progresses. To be clear, this is not an efficient means of leveling. However, early on when you don't have good enough gear or your characters just aren't strong enough to be going all the way through a heavier dungeon where the enemies are capable of killing your party members if you're not careful, using the reinforcements method is the safest means of gaining experience. So the way you want to do this, there's quite a few different methods of doing this. You could go and use the thieves outside in the slums area. You could use the slimes that are both here in the Mausoleum of Flame or in the palace. You could use the crustacean enemies that are in the underwater area. But I find that both in terms of quantity and the common occurrence of actual unit spawning, that the worker zombies in the Mausoleum of Flame are your best option. And the best way to encounter them is just to enter one of the ambush rooms and wait to see a nice big group. The most important ability to have on hand if you're going to be using the worker zombies is just like any immortal enemy, you want to use the Holy Weapon ability. If you don't use this, then the only way you're going to be able to deal damage against the enemies is using magic, or using weapons that have magical properties on them. Since those are very rare to come across in Stranger of Sword City, I highly recommend either having a cleric in your party or having a character who has at least leveled up enough as a cleric to have earned that ability before a class change. In the case of this party loadout, I actually have 3 characters who have it because I honestly value it that much that I'd rather have more instances of characters being capable of doing it, even if having multiple characters with that ability is technically a bad use of an ability slot. Also, since we are using an ambush spot to get the spawns we want, it is very important that you have multiple characters in your party that are capable of dealing damage at range. So special weapons, ranged weapons, magic. If you aren't able to kill the zombie leader before it runs away, then you lose out. So definitely make sure that your loadout includes long-range support. As I said before, all of my characters have reached level 30 in their base class, so they have access to very powerful attacks that if you're just starting out, you will not have access to. But all that really means is that I'm going to be finishing these battles much faster than you initially will, but eventually you'll catch up. So as we finish up the reinforcement method, we see that we earned a total of 32,940 experience over a period of 19 minutes. This was due to waited on around 19 or 20 additional worker zombies to spawn before finishing the battle. Obviously, you can get luckier and cut that down, but I got very unlucky in this, and so it took about 1 minute per additional zombie on average. But that's a pretty good amount of experience. It's not a fantastic amount of experience, but it's really good if you're lower level and you want to safely grind out some levels. Also, keep in mind that I stopped when I did, not because there's any kind of XP fall off at any point, but due to wanting to show the value disparity between this method and the next method. And it would be more difficult to do that if I let that drag on too long. But do know that if you wanted to, you could just do one of those battles for like an hour and probably end up with, 100,000 or more experience easily. Something I want to show before moving on is that this is not a post-game part. As you can see from my blood gem offerings, I am actually still around the halfway point with this save. Now, a level 30 party is really all you need to actually beat the game, but because of how I like to play these kinds of games, I went quite a bit overboard just for the purposes of creating the strongest party I possibly could before taking on the later legs of the game. With that said, once you feel that your party is equipped and you feel confident in their ability to tackle a harder dungeon for a longer period of time, then that's when I feel you should move on to the second method, which, as you're seeing by the title I'm putting on here, is simply a standard grinding method. There's really no tricks to gaining experience in this game. Using the reinforcement method may seem like a trick, but really all you're doing is just fighting a really long battle using reinforcements. There's not any kind of real trickery going on. There's no XP multipliers or anything that you can exploit for gaining huge XP benefits in this game. So your best bet is just to go to places where enemies spawn in good quantities and you can defeat them in a fair amount of time, which I'm going to show by exclusively fighting against groups of those zombie workers in the ambush rooms without attempting to gain excess spawns off of them. So as you can see, in just under 9 minutes of grinding, I've already exceeded the XP that I received from that one reinforcement encounter. But for the purpose of this, I'm just showing just standard grinding for the full period of what it took to do that one reinforcement encounter. And in that same elapsed time, I was able to nearly triple the amount of XP that I received. So, if you know a location that you're capable of efficiently defeating enemies without needing to go back to town every few battles, then that is your best bet for leveling up quickly. But if you're later in, then this is the way I suggest. You can go to the underwater area. There is some value there, but I feel that the enemies just aren't that strong there. There are strong enemies, but they aren't so strong that they give you the same amount of XP that you get from the worker zombies here in the Mausoleum of Flame. I don't necessarily recommend trying to grind out in the slums that much, just because, especially early on, there are enemies out there that can wipe out multiple members of your party in a single round if you're very unlucky. That's happened to me multiple times in the past. So I would say if you're low level, then try the standard method against just enemies in the ruins or in the forest until you feel confident in trying to move on to an area that has more difficult enemies. Anyways, that's it for me. Hope that this helps you out, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.